Hey there. All right, Cats and Axes here. You got Oliver, who's going to help you learn how to throw axes. Most particularly today, what we're going to be focusing on is safety, safety basics. And those are going to include a couple of items that you as a coach are going to have to watch out for constantly. Um, and because we are throwing axes, here, let's get to the cool shit. Because, like, we're talking about axes, right? You want to see the axe. All right. So the cats do not have closed-toed shoes on, so I'm being extremely careful about this grip. They're both over there now. Hey, guys, don't fight. So this is Rambo. He's gonna help too, right? So, all right, guys. When we work with these axes, we always want to make sure that we ourselves have closed-toed shoes on, and also that all of our students slash clients have closed-toed shoes on. If you drop it, I keep this thing razor sharp. I actually shaved part of my arm with it earlier. You're not supposed to do that in a gym. Don't do that. It's not a great idea. I work with these axes. I both throw them and I use them for splitting wood, camping, doing work around here, urban farming. So always want to make sure that your people have closed-toed shoes on. Do not let anybody on the range who does not have closed-toed shoes on. That's number one. Number two is that the coach controls the range. Okay, I've seen this a lot where even in very well controlled and safety oriented environments, people get excited, the coach can get excited towards the end of a session. And of course, your coaches, just as another reminder to owners out there, your coaches are working for two bosses. They're working for you, and they're also working for their students at that time. If they're working for tips, which I'm pretty sure everybody is, that means that they are working for two bosses. So they have to be worrying about their good time the whole time. And so, if people get excited, they want to run on the range. I bring this up because, the group will want to run on the range and high five everybody if somebody made a good shot. Well, you cannot have that. Coach controls the range means a couple of things from a kind of general standpoint and broader philosophical standpoint. But from a practical standpoint, that means no more than two people other than yourself as the coach on the range at any given point. That's just a basic safety protocol. Most gyms are set up this way. Hey, monkeys, stop it. Most ranges are set up this way so that there are two throwing lanes that form one arena. People use different terms for that for those areas, but that's the basic idea. Is that you have one target and another target, and that's kind of an enclosed area. They are partitioned off at the very end of the range from each other, but basically you have two throwers throwing next to each other. In those circumstances, the, the coach has to make sure, absolutely, hey, monkey, that without any exception, that there are only two throwers on that range at any given point. Okay. And why is that? Because we don't want. Hey guys, stop it! Oh man, this is a bummer. Hey, you come here. All right, you come here, big guy. All right, Rambo's gonna help. So, the reason why Rambo, why do we only want two throwers on the range at any given point? It's because you're right, buddy. That's totally right. It's because Rambo says because if we have more than two, it can get crowded, and you're working with sharp instruments. So you do not want to have more than two people throwing axes at any given point on that range. When I say the coach controls the range, I also mean you have to make sure that you're ensuring that the two people who have left the range, who were throwing previously, have left the range before the two additional throwers enter. Okay, that's really important. It's the number one thing I see get messed up, and again, when people get excited, that's what happens. Is that the two throwers are starting to leave the range, and um, you have two coming in, and now all of a sudden you have four people on the range when you're only supposed to have two plus you as the range safety officer, basically. Another part of controlling the range is making sure that the axes stay within the range. Okay, there's a safety perimeter that you have. These axes need to stay in that perimeter. The way I've done it before, is to have them. And some people just put them into a stump. I don't recommend that because you still have, a little bit of the blade sticking out. We've done it at the, place I helped to start up. We put them in a bucket like that down, and absolutely prohibited people from handing an axe to each other, handing the axe between one another. That's another common safety violation that I think it's pretty basic. It goes into a lot of insurance contracts. It creates the potential for dropping the axe. If I'm handing it to another person, unless there are very strict protocols in terms of like, I now have control of the axe, as the other person grabs it, it can drop, it can fall on your toes, it can fall on your legs, whatever. So, never hand the axes back and forth. That is another part of the coach controlling the range. So, in terms of common sense, come here, baby. Come here, Rambo. Rambo's really good help. You come here, buddy. Hey, I know it's a little bit of a sad day. His sister died yesterday, so we're all kind of sad right now. Okay, buddy. Okay, you're not into helping coach right now. Okay, that's cool. So basically, when I say the coach controls the range, it's a number of different things that you need to think about and to focus on. The main thing is you just have the two people in that range, and you make sure that they are behaving the appropriate way with the axes. That gets me to the next point: common sense range safety. Okay, if you've ever shot a gun or ever been on an archery range or anything like that, it's pretty basic. People ask me a lot as a coach. It's funny. They say, "Well, is this safe?" And I'm like, "Well, it's safe right here where we're standing. As long as you do what I say within the bounds of what I say with the axe. It's not safe down there. If you're next to the target, then that's not safe. But if you were actually throwing the axe, and this is part of something that's really important to help students and clients to understand, customers to understand, is that it is safe. It's a basically safe activity as long as you're behaving in a safe manner. As long as they are behaving in a safe manner, and you as the coach are watching how they're behaving. So what does that mean? Don't throw an axe while somebody else is down there. Like one of the most basic things, but you would think it's like not the kind of thing you would have to say, but you have to say it because some people will it's intuitively obvious, but you have to say it because, believe it or not, there have been instances, and I have witnessed them, where I have myself been downrange when some jackass threw an axe while I was down there, next to, in the range next door, but with no fencing between. So dangerous, really dangerous. So common sense range safety, that basically really just means make sure that where those axes are. They're staying on the range, and specifically that no one is throwing an axe when another living thing is downrange. If this is not so common sense necessarily, but if somebody somehow fumbles the axe, and as they're carrying it, advise them just let it fall and get out of its way. Don't try to catch it, because if you try to you could catch that blade. What else in terms of common sense? Tell people not to stand right next to the fences. to stand a few inches back, at least usually a foot back, I would advise, from the fencing material. The fencing material is usually 9 gauge fence sheeting, and that is enough for people to put their fingers through. This falls within the Venn diagram of standing a foot back from it, but I also tell people not to put their fingers through because you would be surprised. Sometimes people want to do that even if you're like, keep a foot back from that fencing. And obviously, people's fingers are through there. If the axe hits it, could take a finger off. But it is okay. People often like to take videos and stuff, and so obviously, we want to encourage that. People sometimes just get a little close to the fencing with their camera phone. What am I from, like last decade? Camera phone. Anyway, from their phone, they're recording with their phone, and you just gotta watch out for that. Make sure that you're policing that if they do get a little too close. What else in terms of common sense? Range safety. When we've talked about this before, don't make sure you're watching out for people throwing way too hard. This usually happens with bros, and they throw just way too hard. It will do most of the damage on your targets. It will actually do like a significant percentage of the damage on your targets. Rambo, it's okay, baby. Oh, sweetie, come here. All right, in terms of carrying and controlling the axes, so at the gym I used to be at, we had this rule, and I don't really know why we had it, but it was like to choke up, you couldn't like carry the axe like this. Now I think that's a good idea, and when I work with axes, like I'll do wood splitting, chopping, and stuff. I've made it a habit to not carry the axe like that. Why? Because you could hit your knees, and it would suck. I mean, I have actually bumped my knee with the pull of this before, when I was less experienced. Just bumped it a little bit. It really hurts, and you definitely don't want this edge hitting any part of your leg. So I recommend at least, I kind of choke up on it after I've thrown it, if I'm walking with the axe at all. This goes for me throwing at the range, or just doing work around the garden, doing work on a campsite, anything like that. I don't ever walk with an axe like that. I rarely do. I generally will choke up on it, at least to there, just so I have a little bit more leverage with it, and that I'm kind of pointing that blade a little bit away from my body, and separating a little bit from my body. Obviously, as a coach, again, you're a range safety officer. Basically, you're going to be watching out for how people are interacting with these. It's a dynamic dance. It's two bodies moving together in a controlled environment, but it is still unpredictable because you don't know these people. You just met them. You're teaching them to throw axes, right? And again, in terms of controlling the axes, just make sure that these axes stay on the range. They don't leave the range, and people aren't handing them back and forth. That the axe goes down. Let's say you have a bucket. One person puts that axe down. The other, they clear and leave the range. And another 2 throwers come in, and each person picks up these axes. Okay? All right. Last thing, really basic, is removing axes from targets. You have to advise people, because there are a couple of things here. One is just the proper technique in terms of how to remove an axe from a target, and the other is just a basic safety protocol. Okay, so when you walk up to, let's say, this was my board, and this was sticking in the board. Okay, when I walked up, let's say I dropped my phone on the way there. Okay, before picking up my phone, I would always grab this first and remove it. Okay, because if I accidentally, as I was standing back up, and I bump the axe with my shoulder, that could come down. This could come down on my head. So, or any other part of my body. You don't want this combined with gravity hitting your body. No good. So, and I say this as a coach, you got to keep in mind. I use that illustration of an iPhone dropping my iPhone, but really it applies to anything near the ground if an axe is in the board. I hope that makes sense. You don't want to be bending down if an axe is in this board. You might accidentally bump it somehow, and it could fall on you. So that's number one. That's a basic safety protocol. And this applies as a coach. I mention it because sometimes you're going to do double axes. You're going to teach people to throw 2 axes at once, or you're just going to show it off for them, whatever. And when you do that, you're going to have 2 axes in the board because you're a badass coach. So you're going to land them like both right there. But maybe you're going to land one in the bullseye and one in the clutch because you're such a badass, right? In that instance, always remove the one on top first and then remove the one lower. Why, again, doing that? Because you don't want to be on this one and not have positive control of this top one and accidentally, as you're removing this, bump that with your shoulder or something like that, and this comes down on you. So always remove that top one first. And if you are approaching a target that has axes in it, take the axes out first, top one first, before you do any other work on it. All right, that's cats and axes. Cats and axes out. Kind of a sad day for cats and axes. We lost Faith yesterday. I've been crying my effing eyes out, and it probably shows on this video. So I hope I was cogent today. Rambo, did I miss anything? Did I miss anything, dude? I don't know. Did I miss anything? Okay. I'm not sure. All right, I think I got it all. That's safety, and we're going to get next to actually throw on axes, which is like pretty cool. All right, awesome.